The legal saga of former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich comes to an end. President Donald Trump pardons the man convicted of 17 corruption charges.
WIFR's Nathaniel Langley learns there's bipartisan pushback to the pardon in the state line.
There may not be much that unites Illinoisans, but Republican and Democratic lawmakers share one feeling for Blagojevich's pardon: disappointment.
I think he's just a very fine person.
With President Donald Trump's signature, former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich is forgiven for his crimes.
This is a decision I would not have come to, so it is something I would disagree with President Trump on.
Blagojevich was removed from office in 2009 on corruption charges. State Senator Dave Severson voted to convict the then governor.
And maybe he's learned his ways, but he was guilty of what he did, and there should be consequences for that.
If we're going to get people to trust government again, we need to be trustworthy. Blagojevich isn't, and pardoning him isn't.
Both lawmakers argue a presidential pardon should consider who deserves forgiveness.
The pardon power was not meant to reward your buddies, right? Or somebody who was on your TV show.
Instead, the Democrat and Republican believe recent presidents' pardons show it's time to reform the power.
I don't love these kind of last-second pardons. I don't love pardons that come in just, because you feel like it.
I think it would be important for Congress to pass some kind of constitutional change.
Trump claims he'd consider Blagojevich to be ambassador to Serbia. Severson says he trusts the president's judgment that Blagojevich can handle it.
Hopefully, he will use this, and his history has been a learning lesson, and that he'll be able to make good.
During his presidential pardon, Trump said it was time Blagojevich had a normal life. He also criticized what he called a terrible injustice performed against the former governor.
Thank you, Nathaniel. And Blagojevich was once a contestant on Trump's TV show, The Apprentice. That was in 2010.
Last year, the former governor labeled himself a Trumpocrat or Trump Democrat.